Estate, Facilities, and Land Management Committee meeting to order. We will begin with the approval of minutes for June 4, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any changes or amendments or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Discussion items. Ms. Brock, if you'll go ahead into the FAA SCAC Oconee Regional Airport Improvement Program.
Yes, I will, and I'd also like to take a moment to welcome and introduce Mr. Joe Barkovich. He's with WK Dixon, which is our engineering consulting firm that does a lot of, in fact, all of our work these days at the airport. And I'm going to let Mr. Barkovich here go over the plan. All of you should have that up on your monitors, yes? The plan here, site plan? If not, we've got paper copies here as well. Just to give an overview of what we have been doing.
There we go. We got it.
And, y'all got it? Yes? Perfect. And what the plan is for the relocation of Nebo Church Road and the West Apron Expansion Project, which is on the council agenda this evening for approval for council fund for 5% for FAA and South Carolina Aeronautics Commission funding.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here. The project started out FAA has a focus on safety, then capacity, and then enhancements. This is not only a safety project, but also capacity. Off the end of runway N7 with Nebo Church Road, that's always been an obstruction to the runway and approaches. If you've been up there, it's kind of at a high bluff coming across. And so we've got aircraft flying and it's a liability. So it's been focused to address with the FAA. We've brought them up to speed. They've lined up funding for you at the 90% level of that project. One of the logistics that we've been going through with the project is splitting it into two pieces because they look at the safety a higher priority and the capacity a secondary priority. Because what we're going to be doing is rerouting Nebo Church Road down to connect into Harbor Acres Road to get that out of there for safety. But also the dirt underneath that road would be trucked over and filled in areas on the airfield terminal area to accommodate apron expansion. So it's kind of, you got peak times, traffic capacity, you're going to have it, you had it last week, you're going to have it this week, you're going to have it numerous times this fall. And the good thing working with the airport manager, Jeff Garrison, is that it's not only at peak times during football games, but also other times of year. You're seeing an upward trend of more and more traffic. That state just did a study, and you've got almost $11 million of impact from the airport itself. It's 55 jobs, direct, indirect multiplier jobs total, and 94 total impact to the region that translates to jobs. So it's pretty good for those levels of investment that you essentially owe no money on. So that's great for you. But anyway, going forward, the FAA has provided 2 grants that have arrived that they're seeking approval for. You have 5% match on that. I'm not sure if you want me to get into the numbers at all for that.
That will come during the council meeting, but if we'd like to go over that tonight, sure.
That's fine. Go ahead and touch on it while,
Yeah.
we got people that listen to us as well.
Yeah,
so
you got your 5% match over the 2 projects. One of them is $30,000 approximately. The other one is $32,000. Match those two, $60,000. You're going to get $2.3 million worth of development, so it's pretty good. 5 cents on the dollar. So 90% funding from the FAA, 5% from the State Aeronautics Commission, and 5% from the county. So that's the gist of the project. There is a second part of the project. The FAA didn't have all the money for it, so next year it's expected that the paving of the actual apron expansion would occur. This is moving all the dirt, getting it in place, getting it ready, and then the actual concrete would go in. The intention is that the concrete will be able to accommodate the largest jets that you have coming in for peak time, so they can be parked on there. More that you have, that's less that have to go on the grass. So
The importance of that, if I can tailgate off of you there, Joe, is Katie, can you pull the pictures up from this past weekend? So I've been working at the airport on Clemson football weekends for about 7 years. Katie's going to pull up a couple pictures for us. And they're taken from the ground. But if you'll look here where that cone is on your left, this is facing toward the east expansion on the apron there. When we get jets with wingspans of 68, 63, 56, it highly decreases the amount of apron space that we have for additional aircraft, because the aircraft that are coming into the airport are larger and larger. Go to the next one. This is looking toward the west expansion where the corporate, no, that's actually east. The other one was west. Sorry about that. So if you look here, we're on the left, there's actually a jet coming in, which we're tucking, and you have to tee them in between the hangars. You know, we have the corporate hangars here, if you look, or our own hangars here. We kind of tee them in, but they all leave at basically the same time. So if the aircraft that's behind there wants to leave in a timely fashion, we have to get a pull out, the tug, pull this aircraft out, stop all the other traffic from moving, get the airplane that wants to leave out. It's a shifting of things, and there's a lot of dangerous activity. One more picture. One more. And then, so in the back here, you'll see the smaller planes like the Sierras, the Cessnas, the Bonanzas, etc. So where we park them in the grass here, even though it appears that there's space in the grass, back here, if you'll look here, we park them in the grass here between the taxiway and the runway itself. But because of these large wingspans, the wings are overspanning the actual asphalt part of the runway. So we can't put them in the grass anymore because of the danger of clipping the planes that are already there. So the necessity for having this expansion is very demonstrated, not just on football weekends, but you know, we do have another eclipse coming up in 20-something years. And we need to look ahead, right?
And the important thing is, and that's great. That's a great summary from the operations. The geometry of your terminal area with the apron and everything, it's kind of linear. You can see it's long, but where it was originally built, you know, you've got the runway, the taxiway, and then you've got the hangars and the terminal building that are kind of close. There's not a lot of expansive apron space there. So when you're constrained, you have to build linearly. And then with terrain, we look for every opportunity we can to fill in and keep expanding. So it's kind of a kill two birds with one stone project.
With the expansion, is it just for the apron, or are we gonna have space to add more hangars also?
Yeah, so
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, ultimately, the apron is expansion of the base and itinerant aircraft, the park. Ultimately, you could park hangars right on the edge of it. So that way, you're right up to it, you open up your door and right down onto the apron. So that's the most logical way to do it. It's just like I was saying, it has to be done in a linear fashion. You can't go deep. A lot of times we like to lay them out in kind of a cul-de-sac configuration. Can't do that right now, but we're doing the best we can with the space you have available.
Addition to that is the FAA doesn't provide any sort of funding for hangars. They will provide the funding for this apron space. Once this apron space is utilized to the point that we can recap some money from the savings that we get and the expense revenues that we receive back from the Jet A fuel sales, then we'll be able to use county funding to build hangars. We can tuck another tiny hangar in down here past where the fuel farm is once we look at relocating the fuel farm. But I have a feeling that'll be in a 5 to 7 year plan, not in a short-term
It was
plan.
my understanding, at least last year, we had 70 people on the waiting list for hangars.
We've increased that number up to 82, I think. We definitely need some hangar space, but we need apron space too, because
Right.
eventually that hangar can sit on the apron space once we keep that expansion going.
We good? Any other questions?
So, will you be here for the council meeting this evening?
I can be. I wasn't planning on it.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to be here. I'm just curious. There's been a little bit of question about what necessitated the removing, or the moving rather, of the Nebo Church Road.
Yeah.
And so you said it was like it's a hill, and I've driven past there
Yeah.
many times. But why does that need to be, I guess, graded down? Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, the road has to be moved off the end of the runway, and it's not on this exhibit, but there's essentially a trapezoid that goes out, and it goes out from the end of the runway 10,000 feet out,
Okay.
and it goes up at a slope of 34 to 1, 34 feet out, 1 foot up. When you do that, it intersects. It actually goes right through the road. So when you put a vehicle on top of the road, you're supposed to clear that vehicle or a hypothetical vehicle by 15 feet. So you're penetrating by 16, 17 feet into that. So we move the road out, get it out of the airspace, shave it down, and then problem solved. So
Who sets this trapezoid?
FAA Part 77 regulations.
So the Federal Aviation
Administration. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
To the federal government.
Yeah,
saying
it's,
we need to
it's
do that.
actually FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, Federal Air Regulations, Part 77, 3C, I believe. I can't recall exactly the section, but that's the section that they've had in place for about 15
So
years.
we're in violation of the regulation.
Right now it's a violation of Part 77. There's another surface that's used to create the approach surfaces, when they publish approaches for instrument conditions. That's got a different, there's about 23 different surfaces that we keep track of around the runway. These are some of the most important ones right off the end of the runway, because it's funneling into the end.
Because you're either coming in or taking
Or
off.
departing, you got it, yep. And it's all based on the elevation of the ends of the runway. If we could build up the end of the runway like a ramp, that increases everything out there, but you're held to certain percentages of slope because of aircraft flying in and rolling and things like that.
And we were
Thank you.
notified of the requirement to lower that road in 2016. It was
Okay.
just a phased-in approach for the removal of that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So the FAA is telling us we need to do this.
Yeah, exactly. It is
Okay.
a safety FAA requirement for moving the end of the runway.
Okay.
The second project to use the dirt from that is beneficial from that to accommodate a capacity project. as
Which
well.
will help us have more capacity, which makes it a little bit safer to park more planes there, which gives us the opportunity to sell more jet fuel, which is why this is predominantly why it's a enterprise fund, right?
It is not an enterprise
Working-
fund.
Or it's why it's almost an enterprise fund.
I
'Cause
think
our-
we could look into that very shortly,
Okay.
just for the record Saturday, and I hope that this number is correct, but if it's not correct, it's a pretty good ballpark. I think we sold about 5,800 gallons of Jet A on Saturday, brought in about $30,000 in one day.
So I'm assuming if we don't relocate that road, eventually the FAA is gonna shut us down.
What'll happen is, if they chose to pursue it, it would be shortening the runway incrementally. So shorter
It's
the
the
runway.
opposite of what we wanted to do.
It's when
Exactly, right.
it's when the insurance companies tell the jets that when they land, they're not covered.
Yeah.
Because that's what changed us originally from the expansion of the runway, because you could land there if you wanted to, but your policy wasn't gonna cover anything that occurred, so that would make most jet owners, because your single engines is not a big deal. They can land
Typically.
pretty much anywhere, almost in a parking lot at times, but, you're mainly talking about the safety of the passengers on the jets and everything like that. And the last thing you want is there to be an issue, that could result in, a crash. And so I think that's what they're trying to address, which I think is, good to be proactive on that, so. And I did go out there as well, and I appreciate y'all looking at that as well, to look at both roads and trying to understand, moving roads that have been in place for a long time, and how we're gonna move them and how we're gonna put them back together, and think through that, what the turn radius is gonna be, what the traffic impact's gonna be, and, your daily use going to your house. It's not a pass-through road, it goes to people's residences. So I think, based on the drawings and stuff that I've seen, I think they've done a really good job at making it a very safe intersection.
And they have been approved, at least preliminarily, by the road department. The bids were open, I think they were open in June, and the engineer drawings passed with Kyle. I met with him today discussing this. And just super quick, if we could, Joe, can we explain the reason, if you don't mind, I'll look it up. Where the relocation for the road is here, where the Mount Nebo Church is. Can we explain why we're not going straight across and making an intersection here with Airport Road?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. With this trapezoid that widens out like this, when you've got that, you try to keep this outside of that for airspace concerns. There's a grade change from this high elevation down to here, which is desirable to get it up out, because you also have a side slope. Like I said, 23 different surfaces we have to keep track of. There's also side slopes here. So you wouldn't want to bring it down here and have a violation when you get close into the runway, because you'd actually be bringing it in closer, which would be even worse. So we have to route it out around over here and get it out of that airspace, if that makes sense.
It does.
It's tough without the airspace layout on there, but we could sit down separately and I could show you the airspace. It's
Is
the
there-
compound angles and things.
Is there an issue if, I know we don't own all the land in that area. Is there an issue with somebody coming in there and building a house in that?
They would
Specific?
not be allowed to have a building permit for that.
Because I know we've purchased most of the land throughout the years and those.
Yes, and we own, so everywhere where the new road is going and where the old road is being relocated from,
Right.
the county does own, yes, sir.
And you own back kind of off this area
Yes.
over into here, been purchasing properties systematically over the last several years as needed, all safety related.
And the road, or the, I guess the runway expansion and the relocation of, I guess, Shallow Road, that's another phase. What does that look like with this setup?
It's completely separate, and the FAA will tell you that has to be justified before they open up the budgets for that. The way that works is with the jets that are coming in, you have to have a certain volume of jets above a certain critical mass. 500 operations, every operation is, an operation is either a takeoff or a landing. So when one aircraft comes in, or one leaves and comes back, so it comes in, that's 2 operations. So if you get 250 visits per year by aircraft that need longer than 5,000 feet, then you package that up, you document it, provide it to the FAA, and start talking about a runway extension. The best way to do it would be to extend here, but you do have to deal with Shiloh Road, of course. So that is a separate project, a couple years down the road, but it all is dependent on the justification. So if you have the justification now, you can move forward with it, but if it's not quite there yet and the traffic is ramping up, then it could happen down the road or sooner than later.
And in review of our airport versus, I'm sure obviously you look at a lot of other ones, what are some things that you see that we're doing a really good job at? What are some things you think we could do better?
The best thing, there's a couple things you're working on. Obviously, this is safety for the approaches and the end of the runway. That's the biggest things you want for 2 things, liability and safety. The second thing is your approach procedures. You want aircraft to be able to get in at nearly all times. When you've got foggy mornings and things like that, you want them to still be able to get in with just a minimal amount of closure. On a really dense foggy, you're going to have some hours per the year, cumulatively just a couple of days together out of 365, but you want those to be as minimal as possible and have the best possible approaches. With terrain and the way it drops off on the other end of the runway and runway in 25, not really an issue. Previously, you had done a good job of cleaning all those up. This is issues on this side. The next things that you actually have next on your list is to do a pavement rehabilitation. Pavement's getting kind of aged. They've gone through, you worked with the state and did some crack sealing on that, painting the numbers, but that's only a Band-Aid to temporarily within a couple of years. It's scheduled for about 2 years from now to go ahead and rehabilitate the pavement. Beyond that, then you can focus on the terminal area and terminal building capacities, apron expansions and things like that. And then somewhere along that way, if you feel you have the justification for the runway extension, then you submit in the FAA for the runway extension. So, you've got a capital improvement plan. We can have a separate meeting about that and talk about, but you've got a capital improvement plan that we are constantly working with the airport manager to update to give the most efficient way to tackle these projects. Because there is a lot of things that you need to do, but you gotta be able to chip away at them, working with the available funding. So,
Any other question? I appreciate you
Yeah.
driving from Columbia.
yeah, no
So,
problem. No problem. Do you need me to stay for the later meeting?
it'd be fun. If you're okay to do that, that'd be good.
Yeah, I can do that, yeah.
I'll get you some food before then.
Yeah, no, it's no worries.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll feed you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I'm on
Joe.
my day.
And just as a note, Jeff did want to come, but they let staff off and stagger throughout the week, and I told him to please stay at the airport, seeing as how there were only 2 people on duty today.
All right. Unless you have anything else to add on that, Ms. Brock, we'll move on
I just
to-
really appreciate y'all
Energy
taking the time
efficiency
to
study?
look through this. The airport said it's growing, and it's super exciting. Sometimes I feel like because we do so much work, we don't actually highlight the good things there, but seeing our report card, I don't know if y'all have had a moment to flip through just some, Aeronautics Commission documentation and the total number of grants that the federal and the Aeronautics Commission has invested in Oconee County is in excess of 30 million. That's quite a testament to the airport itself. So moving on to the energy efficiency study. So a while back, I was looking at the monthly expenditures, just going through things here, what we spend each month and each APay, and did a quick little spreadsheet here, and I'm like, wow, we spend a lot of money on energy. And I knew that Pine Street was absolutely not an energy efficient building, but looking at some of the other buildings, it didn't occur to me that they weren't. And it may be that they're not energy efficient, it may be that they're just very large buildings where we're expending money on energy. And I thought it would be nice for us to take a look and see if we could increase any of these efficiencies, and if so, how. There are a couple of companies out there. Johnson Controls is one of the locals companies that does energy studies. This energy study is 100% completely free. We've just started it. This is the list that I provided to our representative there. Again, there's no cost to this. It's just a study looking at how we are using the most amount of energy, and if there are implementations we can consider to lower that cost. If you'll look and see the annual amount of expenditures for the top 5 or 6 buildings here, and if you notice number 8 is unoccupied, other than having a once-a-week health department clinic in it, we can capture some savings here. And this is just something, if y'all heard about people roaming around the counties looking on roofs, studying voltages or whatnot, that this is what's going on. It's something that I just think we need to look into. If it comes back and says we're using adequate or no more than normal, then I think that's great news. But I have a feeling it's going to come back and say we could increase our efficiencies. Some of those possibilities include computer-controlled light switches. You know, when you walk into a newer building and there is no light switch, but the light comes on when you walk in a room. Some of those things, especially in this building, we have some rooms that aren't occupied. Our break room and office room is one, where I'm the worst about leaving the light on in there. So it'd be nice to see if we could implement just some savings. I don't have anything formal to present at this time. I just thought that it may be something that you'd like to be aware of, and would like to see this when it comes out as a report.
I think it's definitely something that a lot of companies are looking at as well, from all the changing from the LED to the motion lights and everything like that. So.
Yes, well, even in the hallways, we noticed a significant decrease in the expenditures here in this building by putting the flat panel LEDs in the hallways just in this building. So it's something I think we should look into doing, especially in rooms where we have this many lights, or in office buildings where a lot of lights are required, in bathroom and public access areas. We could make some great efficiencies there.
Well, in the room motion area, the switches have gotten a lot more efficient, and they actually work better than, I've been in some where they don't detect the person being in there, and if you sit around a table and they turn off. But I think that's changing a lot, so I think I need to change everything to my house to motion sensor, especially my kids' room.
If they're turning off, maybe we're sitting still too long. That may be another thing where we have, okay, everybody up and get up, walk around for a minute. This is just something that we had looked at in years past. And we did get an efficiency study, obviously, with the detention center. But the detention center is a few years old now, and if that's one of our largest users, and I'm not picking on them, it's a very big building. We know that we have some here. This is just an exploratory measure to see where we can make things better.
Any other things to add on that? Any other business needs to be discussed? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.